Sonder. That sudden, disorienting realization that every single stranger walking past you is living a life as vivid and complicated as your own, with their own worries, relationships, private jokes, and entire interior world you'll never have access to. Most people experience this fleetingly, maybe while sitting in traffic, watching a crowd from a window, or passing through an airport. A brief collapse of the assumption that you're the main character and everyone else is background noise. The word Sonder was actually coined relatively recently, in 2012, by writer John Koenig, for his project, The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, filling a genuine gap where no existing English word captured that exact feeling. Hiraeth. A word borrowed from Welsh, Hiraeth describes a deep, aching longing for a home you can't return to, sometimes because it no longer exists, sometimes because it never quite existed the way you remember it. It's stronger and stranger than simple nostalgia, less about missing a place, and more about missing a version of belonging that time has since dissolved. Welsh speakers often describe Hiraeth as untranslatable, specifically because English collapses several related feelings, homesickness, nostalgia, grief, into separate words, while Hiraeth captures the specific ache of all three overlapping at once. Limerence. Distinct from simple romantic attraction, Limerence describes the intense, often involuntary psychological state of infatuation, intrusive thoughts about a specific person, an overwhelming need for reciprocation, and emotional highs and lows that hinge entirely on their perceived interest. The term was coined in the 1970s by psychologist Dorothy Tenove, who studied the condition specifically because she noticed existing words like crush or infatuation failed to capture how genuinely disruptive and involuntary the experience could be, closer to an altered mental state than a simple feeling. Kenopsia. The eerie, unsettling atmosphere of a place that's usually bustling with people, now completely empty, an abandoned school hallway, an empty office after hours, a theme park after closing. It's not quite fear, and not quite sadness, but a specific, almost physical sense of absence, like the space itself is holding the memory of activity that's no longer there. Kenopsia is another Koenig coinage, built from Greek roots meaning empty and appearance, designed specifically to name a sensation most people recognize instantly, but had never had a single word for. Monachopsis, the subtle, persistent feeling of being out of place, not quite belonging in your current environment, even when nothing is overtly wrong. It's different from loneliness or social anxiety. Monachopsis describes a quieter, more diffuse sense that you're somehow the wrong fit for wherever you currently are, like wearing clothes that technically fit but never feel like yours. Many people report feeling this in new jobs, new cities, or even long familiar settings that have subtly shifted around them. Vellichor. The strange wistfulness of being inside an old, used bookstore, surrounded by books that once belonged to other people, each one carrying an entire unknown history you'll never fully access. It's a specific blend of curiosity, nostalgia, and quiet melancholy, tied not to any one memory, but to the accumulated weight of countless untold stories sitting on the shelves around you. Vellichor captures something many book lovers have felt intensely, without ever having language precise enough to explain why a bookstore, specifically, produces that particular emotional texture. Anemoia. Nostalgia for a time or place you never actually experienced yourself, a wistful longing for an era you only know through old photographs, films, or stories passed down from someone else. It's distinct from ordinary curiosity about history. Anemoia carries genuine emotional weight, a real sense of loss for something you have no personal memory of, borrowed entirely from cultural imagery rather than lived experience. Occhiolism. The subtle, humbling awareness of just how limited your own perspective actually is. The recognition that your entire understanding of the world is built from one narrow vantage point, and that billions of other equally valid, equally narrow perspectives exist simultaneously. It often surfaces during moments of genuine perspective shift, encountering a wildly different culture, reading about historical events from an unfamiliar angle, or simply staring up at the night sky and grasping, briefly, how small your specific viewpoint really is. Jouska. An imagined conversation that plays out entirely in your head, one you compulsively replay, rehearse, or revise, whether it's a confrontation you're preparing for, an argument you never got to finish, or an entirely hypothetical scenario you can't stop mentally rehearsing. Jouska describes something nearly everyone does regularly, but rarely names: the internal, imagined dialogue that runs quietly underneath daily life, sometimes more vividly than the real conversations actually happening around you. Opia, the intense, ambiguous intimacy of direct eye contact, a feeling that's simultaneously vulnerable and invasive, like you're seeing someone else deeply, while also being seen in a way that feels almost too exposed. Opia captures the strange tension of sustained eye contact, specifically, not quite comfortable, not quite uncomfortable, but charged with an intensity most people feel instinctively, without ever having a word to describe exactly why holding someone's gaze feels so different from simply looking at them. Putting it together, none of these feelings are new. Sonder, Hiraeth, Limerence, Kenopsia, Monachopsis, Vellichor, Anemoia, Occhiolism, Jouska, and Opia describe experiences humans have almost certainly always had: walking through empty spaces, missing places that no longer exist, holding someone's gaze a beat too long, replaying conversations that never happened. What's new is simply having the language to name them. That gap between feeling and language matters more than it seems. Emotions without names are harder to recognize, harder to discuss, and easier to dismiss as vague or irrational. Once a feeling has a word, it becomes something you can actually identify in the moment, describe to someone else, and realize you're far from the only person who's ever felt it. Subscribe to Explain Simply, because sometimes understanding starts with simply having the right word.